guess this means like there's now like a very slight or light difference between a person that is married and a person that is living in a partner set. It means they can find themselves being subjected in the same treatment. Should one of should one of the parties pass away. All right, people, let me welcome you on Asvaye. Today, our guest is Johannes Coetzee. My brother, let me welcome you on Asvaye Kasi Explorer. Look, man, I'm very excited with today's session, especially that is you that I'm interviewing. Let me tell you something. So researching about you was one of the constructive things I did for this week. That it was one of the things that I did this week. So I'm super excited to have you here, man, and it's an honor and privilege to have you.
Likewise, man. I hope you found you found some constructive things while you were doing your research. But thanks for having me, man. It's always an honor.
Yeah, brother man. And it was not only constructive, but it was challenging as well because you like you legally articulate yourself. You articulate yourself in sections, like in law, man. So hey, some of the things were really challenging since like there's a barrier of law jargon, for someone who didn't
True,
study law. Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I always try to confine myself within my profession and my qualifications. So I'm always trying to do better by doing that. And also, I'm not that visible or that present on social media, so I doubt you would find anything other than the little I post.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Brother, man, tell me. I think we should start right there. Like
Okay.
when I look at your profile, it's that, and to me it looks like it looks like a passion. Is it a passion that you followed like the law profession, or where do you
Um,
come
I,
across the love for LLB?
when I jokingly say it was a calling for me, right? But my first encounter with the love for law, I think I was doing grade 8 or 9. I'm not sure because I read the book twice. So I came across a book in my local library now, and the title of the book is The Color of Law. So it's about a white attorney in the US who now had to present or represent rather, a black sex worker, a black poor sex worker. So when he did that, everything went wrong in his life. He lost his job, he lost his family, he lost his house, for the mere fact that he's representing a black poor sex worker. Uh, uh, at that stage, I was sort of encouraged to, study this thing as well and see how far or how best I can use it as a tool, to advance the cause for social justice and equality. So yeah, my first encounter was through the reading of a book, but I jokingly say to people, I feel like this is a calling for me. I can't imagine myself doing anything other than this.
Yeah, we're gonna get into depth of that, but I want us to take it back now to when you're growing up, at a very young age, remembering your childhood level. Tell me, man, how was it growing up in the small township? Is it Lago?
Look off, yes, look off.
Yeah, Lukov. Yeah, yeah.
So it's a very very small town south of Bloem, yeah, in the Free State. So it's an agricultural town, right? So by virtue of that, not a lot is happening, right? Not many make it in life. Not many make it to varsity. Not many make it past matric. So one of my challenges was not having access to many things, information, people to look up to, and stuff like that. So I had to make the best of what I had at that time, or my circumstances rather. So I was heavily invested into, just reading books and just making sure I pass as well as possible. I knew at some stage I'm gonna need to choose a career. I'm gonna need to go to varsity and stuff like that. But growing up, my main challenge was not having people to look up to and not having access to resources, information, whatever the case may be. And also the town is very much neglected, in as much as it is an agricultural town that serves as a one-stop for all these farms around it. Not much is happening in terms of development, and also just growing up in the town itself, it's a bit difficult to dream beyond it, but I had to make the best of what I have, because I didn't want to be, just a number in the town itself,
And now, where do you meet the spirit of leadership around that, like around the childhood process, or you really, where did you meet the spirit of leadership?
Okay, so I'm from a very political influence background, right? So most of the men and women in my family are sort of involved in politics. So I was exposed to, I won't necessarily say leadership, because I always think of politics and leadership and all of that. I always try to draw the line, but I was sort of directly exposed to various platforms within the political space. So I looked up to my cousins, my father as well. My father is um, one of the activists I look up to personally. So I took it from my immediate surrounding. So I was influenced by my immediate surroundings, because already from my childhood there were these people who played an active role within the community and around themselves.
Yeah. Oh, and tell me, what are some of the things that made you feel like you were exclusive, like growing up, like that made you feel like maybe you're an outcast around other kids, or didn't you have such things?
No, definitely, definitely. Um, uh, like I said earlier on, I spend most of my time trying to consume as much as possible, information and knowledge. And you know how it is in our smaller towns, in our smaller communities. The idea is that once you start, developing yourself, people would say you think you're better than them, um, those type of things. So I always got that, in terms of people just saying, this one is trying to be smarter than the rest of us. So there were a lot of backlash up until matric. So it was difficult to navigate that as well. Just trying to exist in a space where we are different, where we are all different, but having to deal with people who can't comprehend that fact that we are all different and we aspire to be different things, or that we are moving towards different things. So the backlash was really that, me trying to develop myself, consuming so much knowledge, information and stuff. So that was sort of that thing that made me feel like an outcast, because I didn't do things that kids normally at my age would do. I was very different, and also the compliments from elderly in my community were like, he isn't like the rest of the kids. He's different than the rest. I wish my son could be like him. I wish my daughter can be like him. So there were always that, yeah.
Yeah, I see, man, and I wanna bring this question, and I think it will be like the large part of our session. Now, what's
Okay.
your relationship with poverty, brother? Like, how do you relate with poverty? What are some of the things that have made you feel like very worst about I mean, the fact that you exist around the space where people are living below the line of poverty. This
Mm,
is where I'm coming from with this question. Um, there's this video I saw on your timeline of this girl who had a first ride for the first time for Uber, and her mother was struggling, and she had to go to metric farewell, and she didn't have a thing, and it was a birthday on that day. So they sent a letter to Anele in her radio station, and people started contributing towards that lady going to metric dance and all that stuff. And one of the things that you captioned there was like, you can relate with this deeply. Tell me about your relationship with poverty.
that's an interesting one. I would say I have a direct relationship with poverty. I know nothing other than poverty. I'm heavily consumed by it. I don't think there was a time, or there is a time in my life where I don't feel poor. Now that you mentioned that video, my saying I can relate to it is also the fact that I was sort of in a similar situation when I was in matric, and then it was time for matric farewell. I had no intentions of going, because that would mean now that my parents had to save up, and that would then mean that the struggle would be harder. Them having to save up so that I can look good on that night. So I had no intentions of going. I made it clear that I'm not. And then my English teacher approached me on some, hey, listen, I would like to sponsor your entire outfit for the night, including the shoes. So that's why I could relate so much with that video, because I was in a similar situation. I know exactly how that must feel. And also just now, the type of work that I'm doing now, and also looking at where I come from. I can never say I've lived comfortably, and in terms of not having to worry about what am I going to eat the next day, or what am I going to eat tonight. It's a constant thing for me. I don't know anything other than that, having to worry about where's the next meal going to come from. So there's a direct line really in terms of myself and poverty, and where I find myself within, the class structure. I always say I'm at the lowest of the lowest, and it's a constant struggle. So it's just a struggle of survival, if I can put it that way.
And in that situation, I like the lens which you view things. You view things with. In the same like scenario, um, you say, I want to put it like this. You gain like a spirit of I don't know, a hero to your a hero to your family, that you don't wish that one day you can see the same situation happening in your power. And how did you get to that point? Because I mean, there are a lot of people that are living in the state of poverty, but they never reach a thought of saying, I want to change this, and
Mm.
I want to change this. I really want to bring different results. How did you get to that mindset? Exactly.
So growing up, I think amongst my siblings, I am the most understanding, right? So in whatever situation I find myself, I always ask, how bad can it be? What's the worst outcome? And I always try to look at a bigger picture. So for in an instance, let's say where I needed something that needed money or monetary contribution, I would ask, Can I live without this? Can I survive without this? How bad can it be? So I always try to look at the bigger picture and then say, but if it's not that severe, if it's not that problematic, if it's not that big, there's no need for me to entertain it. So I always try to be understanding as much as possible, especially when it comes to things that involves money, because I know it's a constant struggle. So me, and just having this, being this understanding person, I would always settle for less. I would always settle for, and I always encourage my siblings as well. To say that, but what's the worst that can happen if you are not in that position, or if you don't have one, two, three? What can happen? So I always try to look at the bigger picture, analyze it, and see if it's really necessary to go the extra mile. To break a few bags. It's always important to be conscious of your immediate surroundings, of your standing, your social status, and how you perceive things. So I always try to bring it home in terms of saying, but I can live without this, I can survive without this. So being understanding has been I think one of my proudest things, just to say, just be understanding and understand that not everything requires a reaction, or it requires contribution, or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
I love that, man. Especially when you speak about surroundings, I'm very sensitive when it comes to people that surround me. I really love that. What are some of the best principles that you picked up, like that you picked up in a situation of struggles, especially where you're coming from, that really fueled you when you get at the university? Because university is such an inclusive space that if you don't have a
Mhm.
backbone, you end up conforming to other things. What are some of the best principles that made you live in the space of university and survive? Because I mean, LLB, man, that that takes time. I mean,
Mhm.
that takes time. It's a lot that is happening there. I've had two modules of law,
Definitely.
so I have a sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I always try to remember where I come from. Most importantly, is always try to remember where I come from, and also then just to put myself in a situation where, if I hadn't, if I wasn't privileged to have that support structure where I come from, I wouldn't be in the space. So whatever I do, I always ask, how would the people who look up to me, or who are behind me, would react? So I always try to imagine what, or how people would react and how they would perceive it. So it's never just about me as an individual. I always say I'm never alone, as I always use the term we when I speak about things that involve others, or just things in general. I never use the term I, because I'm never alone. There's an army behind me. So I always look at where I come from and how would that impact those people that are behind me, or those who look up to me. Because I think also many confided in me in terms of saying that we look up to you. We are proud of where you are currently. We wish to be like you, because we know your immediate surroundings are not conducive, for growth and development. And also, with me is that, like I said, not everyone from Lukov makes it to varsity. They don't even make it past matric. And the career options are always limited in terms of what people study, or where they find themselves after varsity. It's either you're a teacher, you're a nurse, you're a policeman, or policewoman, or anything like that. No one really stretches themselves, beyond what everyone is doing. So with me, it was way different when I was also encouraged to do something that is predominant in my community. I protested against it. I said, I'm not going to do it, because I do not want to be in a situation where I wake up having regrets. Remember, this thing is a lifelong thing. As I said, to me, it's a calling. It's a lifelong thing. You don't just come to varsity just to get the paper. It becomes part of you. It becomes who you are. Right now, I don't think I can imagine myself without this degree. So I always look at that and say, um, 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 just look back, man. Just reflect on whatever you're going through. Just reflect. And as you said, the university space can swallow you, especially if you don't have principles in life, or if you don't subscribe to any principles. It can swallow you. It can make you what you don't want to be, or can put you in a very compromising position. So for me, it's that constant reflection, and also just having honest conversations with people who look up to you. People pretend a lot. People pretend a lot out there. They have this clean life and everything's going smoothly, but once the lights are off and the curtains are closed, it's a whole different story. And I always try to be as open as possible to say I do have, and as much as I rose above many challenges, I still undergo challenges. There are still challenges. Nothing is that straightforward, especially if you consider it within the space of a university. Remember, university is way different than high school. It's different people, different energies, different backgrounds. So um, the best you can do is to be you, not to conform to anything or any standards that you cannot meet at a later stage. So for me, it's that constant reflection.
Mm. Brother, man, what are some of the lies that you picked up as you were growing up that you really had to unlearn or detach yourself from, like that maybe after detaching yourself or after learning that particular lie, your life changed into like a favorable thing that you probably had or loved.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to submit this as an analogy for this question. One of the lies that I had from our society or from my community was that like certain things were meant for certain people. And I grew up with
Yes.
that. I grew up with that, man. And I wanna tell you, brother, that like took so much joy from me because there was nothing that I thought like it was meant for me. When they said certain things are meant for certain people, to me it really felt like there are boxes and I have to choose the box. And there's no
Yes.
box that I seem to be competent on. So
Yes.
that's,
Yes.
I mean, later on, I discovered that, oh no, it was a lie. It was a
Mm-hmm.
lie. It doesn't take only talent, but it also takes, like, if you really want it and you value it, you can have like growth mindset and you can actually do that. So that's one of the lies that I had to unlearn, Guti. Certain things are meant for certain people, especially at school. I remember there was a time where I was failing so much and the voices around were like, you mentally retarded. You're not
Uh-huh.
meant you're not meant like to assimilate things logically. So you
Mm-hmm.
better consider something else. But there's a mindset that I engaged on which changed my life, and that mindset became like an evidence that, oh, it was a lie that certain things are meant for certain people. So
Certain people.
yeah, 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 yeah. Just tell me about yourself, man. About yours.
Yeah. On my side, it's a bit more, not necessarily intense. But I concur with what you said in terms of people just saying um, how can it be possible that someone from Lukov can be a lawyer? And I'm actually the first LLB holder. So that was one of the biggest. Also, just a personal thing, not necessarily personal, but something that I enjoy so much now is having the freedom to choose. Growing up, you are boxed, you are restricted, and your mindset is kind of guided, channeled through all these external influences, that you have to be religious, you have to be you can only be attracted to opposite sex, you can only do one, two, three. So once I sort of unchained myself from that sort of thinking, I started exploring as much as possible, um, I denounced Christianity, number one, and I explored the the prism of sexualities, right? So I explored beyond what the or my confinement or my immediate surroundings. But yeah, one of the biggest lies was that you cannot be someone else. You can't. This is the way of life. Sort of like there is now a handbook. You have to live strictly according to this handbook. Once I detached myself from that, I started exploring so much, and I uncovered and learned so much about myself and also how the world operates, and I think that's where also my passion for um, human rights and social justice come from, as well as my passion for community development, because I understand that our thoughts are influenced by so many interchangeable, challenges and things out there. So it's always, I always say it's important to trust your guts. Just go for it and see where it goes, and ask yourself what's the worst that can happen. I live by that philosophy now. What's the worst that can happen?
I
celebrate achievements because the environment wasn't enabling, it didn't enable me to sort of celebrate achievements because celebrating achievements takes so much, and also it puts you in a place now where it would seem that you sort of think that you're full of yourself and all of that. But what I would say is to never downplay your achievements. Number one. Um, what I learned also is that there isn't really a place for downplaying your achievements in this life thing, because at the end of the day, you're only hurting yourself. Also, never use your surroundings as an excuse, because you definitely can rise above that. Many of us did. There are many successful people who have been in the very same situation. And also just try not to be so consumed by your surroundings, because the moment you consume, you are so much, the moment you get consumed by that, your thinking process or your thought process um, becomes limited, because to you now, you think that's how it's supposed to be, and that shouldn't be the case. So always challenge your immediate surroundings by changing your mind, or having a shift of a mindset, because it's very important to always look at a bigger picture and ask how bad can it be, and never stop dreaming. Um, all dreams are valid and all dreams can come true. It's very important to sort of have a vision for yourself. I know what us now who are from poor backgrounds, there's now this gap where we have to now sort of reach what's this thing catch up with the rest of our peers. So there's this gap now where we have to get ahead as well and catch up, and that gap can be sort of intimidating, or that stage rather can be intimidating, because um, you are trying to make it, but you're also trying to make up for lost opportunities, and and stuff like that. So it can be very limiting, but it all depends on how you see it, because a situation is, it's essentially what you see, right? So it's important to sort of look beyond that and ask yourself, how bad can it be? What's the worst thing that can happen? Always.
Mm, like that, brother. And now let's jump into the stage of university. You're at the university doing your first year right now. What are some of the challenges that you come across as the first year at the university? Remember, one of the things that I faced, it's a crazy thing, man. One of the things that I faced as a first year is actually needing like a very imperative information at that moment, and you find just a person who have no like full idea of things, and they will be like, nah, there's nothing like that here, and you end up
Uh,
losing like like a very important thing. Like, what are some of
yes.
your challenges that you're doing for first year?
Um, assimilation. Um, I struggled a lot with that. Um, I sort of restricted myself in terms of doing what was required of me. But some of my immediate challenge, I think my immediate challenge was be asking questions as much as possible, right? But also a challenge I faced at that time was the issue of securing accommodation. And that was one of the most difficult thing, because number one, I do not know Bloom. I do not even know how a university setup works. And also the transition from now Afrikaans medium school to an all English environment, where things happened so fast. Most of the time, you feel left out. And I remember after our first tests, um, I wanted to quit, because I felt that it was too fast and I couldn't keep up. But I was then now put in a position to ask those questions. Why am I here? Where do I want to see myself? So definitely for me, it was the biggest challenge was the transition from a quantile 3 Afrikaans medium school to an all English environment where you only know the basics, and now you have to sort of speak this language on a daily, you have to make it part of who you are now. And also the resident setup, now coming from a background where I would share a room with my siblings. Uh, I sleep on the floor. Now getting to varsity, where I now share a room with a total stranger, and so that to me was also a bit of a challenge because you do not know what to do in that situation. You've never been exposed outside your immediate home situation. So I now had to adjust in terms of that, having to stay in a place where there are many of us. But what I always did was to hang with people who share sort of the same background with me so that we can navigate it together so it doesn't feel like a burden. So definitely the transition from my immediate surroundings, boom, varsity, what must happen now? So yeah.
And how do you now? I want to be specific on the question of leadership. How do you get in? How do you get introduced into student leadership at the university?
Well, the year was 2018. Was 2018 years, my second year. There was an issue at my residence. Not necessarily an issue, but I had to demonstrate now my passion for social justice, right? So, having lived in a predominantly and historical white residence with over 100, at the time it was 110 years of white history, right? So it never had that chance or that stage where that history was interrupted, right? So up until 2015, mid 2015, early 2016, it was still an all in white inclusive university with a residence with the whole structure and everything being privately owned, right? So the university then opened the door of the residence for outside, or not necessarily outside, but to everyone, right? You can now get placed in the res itself. Then I got in there. I immediately started questioning so many things that didn't sit well with me and others as well. So I now had to lobby or rally people behind the cause to transform the residents, because many of us could not relate to the cultures of or the culture of the residents. I think for me that was my first instance or my first encounter with the whole activist political student leadership space. So and then later that year, our course succeeded. We managed to get the residents transformed. And from there on, I always tried to align myself with whatever causes I believed in at that time. So I would join political movements and, uh, go or experience the whole leadership thingy. But also for me, the how can I put this? The term leader, or political leader, or student leader, or whatever leader, I find it a bit problematic because it speaks now to hierarchies. So I always encourage people that I come in contact with um, to rather use a more inclusive word. So hence I do not refer to myself as a leader in any space, because it's hierarchies. I do not like hierarchies. So hence I think I won't be fit for a 9 to 5 because I do not like hierarchy structures. But yeah, that was my introduction into the activist spaces by doing something in my immediate space, which was the residence, and having to learn that the university itself wasn't as gloomy and shiny as we thought it was. So I started being actively involved in so many causes in my personal capacity and as an activist within a political organization.
And brother, I want to now get. I know I'm so jumpy with questions. I know I'm so jumpy with questions. I want to, yeah. I want to question now the things that you realize during during the process of learning law and learning how it works. During that process, what are some of the things that you realize that as people, especially people of color,
Yes,
we've
yes.
been like we've been so not aware of these things, like things like certain rights that we're not really alert of. What are some of the things that you realize that we're actually sleeping on as far as law is
Mhm.
concerned?
Um, my first encounter with the law itself, I thought to myself, this thing wasn't designed for us because it do not cater for us in any way, directly or indirectly. So I was then put in a position where I started critiquing the law, to say to start asking those questions as to why is the law white, male, old dominated? By that I mean white old males who are dominating the field and who are also exclusive of women, whether it's white women or black women. So I started questioning that, but I didn't only do that behind the keyboard to say that this is what's wrong, this is what must happen. No, um, I I wrote or I researched my first research paper and I presented it at a conference for students at the University of Venda. So my paper was titled the decolonization and Africanization of legal education in South African universities by saying that so I started sort of leaning towards the academic side of the law because that's where the not the how can I put it, the structure of law is formulated, where people formulate the philosophy of law, and that influences other spheres of law. So if you are not critical of who the law serves, it will be difficult for you to understand why it does not serve a certain group. So I was then constantly in a process of questioning certain things, right? I started writing just informally on it, and I presented another paper as well, that was born out of the first paper, to say that why is it structured in the way it is. So my encounter with the law isn't a one of saying this is the law, therefore it should stay like that. No, I started questioning it so much that I became invested in the whole idea of the decolonization, the Africanization of the law. I started being critical about the law instead of just wanting the degree, get out of university without gaining any critical experience around it. But what I do currently, or what I always try to do, is look for cases or scenarios that speaks directly to our people. So in whatever space or situation I find myself in, I always try to educate a bit on it, Remember, being critical about the law means that you are able to spot or you are able to identify gaps within a certain space. So that's my encounter with it. I do love it. I absolutely do. But I do not think it's the perfect system for us. And therefore, we should be critical of it and we should question it as much as possible so that at one stage, it can cater for us, it can cater to our needs as well, because the way it was designed or the way it was introduced wasn't to the benefit of people who look like you and me. You know, we were always sort of victims of it. At some stage, we were we were deemed as property in terms of the Roman Dutch law. You know, so
Property.
it's always important. Yes, it's always critical. It's always important to be critical about that as well.
Right, what do you mean, like we're deemed as property?
As slaves,
Is this like in times of slavery?
yes, slaves were deemed as property, and also I think
Yeah.
the development from that was still that idea, and also if you look at how domestic workers are viewed. They are not viewed as persons necessarily, but the manner in which they are viewed is to say that you just come, you clean my house, I give you whatever the case may be. Hence, now domestic workers are in such a better position than they were previously because the law is forever developing and we are forever recognizing our intrinsic human rights, you know. So the history of law and the philosophy of law has a long history, and some of those histories are still manifesting in the law today. It's always those subtle, those undertones, so you won't necessarily see it as such. So it's always important to be critical of that, you know.
Mm, I think I've heard this once. I don't know, man, how accurate is this, and I don't know if you guys share a space with these people. Like, I mean, the guys of the laws that we're living with, it is actually inherited from the apartheid system. How true is that?
Or some of the laws that are currently existing is, I think you're breaking up because I'm struggling to hear.
I, am I
Can you just
breaking?
repeat that again? Yes.
Uh, okay. I'm saying I've heard someone saying like majority of the I don't know if I should or let me say majority of law that is used in today's world or in the current world in our world is inherited from the discrimination system that we had.
Yeah, no, I get that question. Uh, I wouldn't say necessarily say inherited, but some of the apartheid laws or some of the laws that were in operation during apartheid are still operating today, right? But it isn't a blanket, it isn't a sort of a blindfolded thing or a blanket approach or anything like that. Um, Remember now we have the Constitution of the Republic, and the Constitution is deemed the supreme law of the land. So any law or act or any rules or any act of parliament that is in conflict with the Constitution are deemed um, unlawful and unconstitutional, right? So there's that challenge. There's that continuous challenge to some of the laws that were operating during apartheid. I don't think it would have made sense to just scrap everything from the get-go, you know. So there's that continuous challenge of certain provisions of an act, for example. So let's if we have let's say a certain section of a piece of legislation that do not conform with the constitution, then obviously it will be challenged and it will be properly ruled on. But yes, some of the laws are still operating today. Yeah.
There's this interpretation you made about fat and set. Um, like what's happening? Um, tell me, brother, what are some of the things that we are not we're not aware and can put us in a in a smoke there? Because I had something like the person that you are fat and setting with have a right to claim certain estate or amount of estate if maybe you passed away. And can you please go through the interpretation of that?
Okay, so a few months ago, the Constitutional Court had to rule on a matter in which the parties to the matter were living sort of cohabitation, right? What we normally refer to as your fat and sits, right? So what happens in an instance where one of the parties die without leaving a valid will or die intestate rather, right? So if you look at our matrimonial law, as to what type of arrangements we have, right? We have your common law marriages, the marriage you know. We have customary marriages. We have civil unions as well. Other than that, then we have what we call universal partnerships. You can go into a cohabitation agreement, a signed cohabitation agreement with someone, right? So then the court had to deal with the issue of what must happen in that instance where there are no the guiding document that deals with the assets of that person, right? So I think the interpretation that was before the court was to say who then is a surviving spouse or who is a survivor in terms of Section 1 of the Maintenance of Surviving Spouses Act, because that's the act that deals with the distribution of or rather the maintenance of a surviving spouse, right? So the court then said, because of the environment or the situation or the circumstances we find ourselves, the word spouse and marriage, spouse, the word spouse and its own and marriage should then also include partners who are in a permanent life partnership, right? So, but this won't be a blanket approach. It will depend on a case by case, as to say, during the sustenance or during the tenure of this relationship, can we then safely say these people were in a life or a permanent life partnership, right? So, and also they also had then to, the court then said a partner who then were a partner to someone or were a partner in a life partnership is then entitled to claim from the deceased partner's estate, right? So, but like I just mentioned also, it won't be a blanket approach. You still need to prove why you should be maintained after one partner died, you know.
And I guess this means like there's now like a very slight or light difference between a person that is married and a person that is living in a pattern set. It means they can find themselves being subjected in the same treatment. Should one of the parties pass away.
Yes, that's essentially what it boils down to. Depending then on the relevant facts of the case. So people say now there's no need to marriage then. Remember, we have this different type of marital regimes for a reason, to protect your interest, right? So it's not necessarily an issue of saying let's not get married, let's just fat and sit. The court might not find that link between your partner who is now dead and you who is still alive. So I would still advise people to seek proper legal advice in that regard, because we do have what we call cohabitation agreements, and we also have life partnership agreements, and you can also get married in terms of the Civil Union Act. So the options are many. So it's important to engage in something that is sound and legal, so that you do not have to deal with disappointment once it doesn't go your way, because we interpret things different, and what applied to this case might not be applicable in your instance. So it's always important to seek proper legal advice in that regard on a normal basis. That being your prayers and stuff, I always found it a bit difficult, so then I started questioning it, respectfully so, because it's important to also respect other people's religious views and religions. So I started questioning it, and I started having that internal debate with myself, and I asked myself, and I asked, what's the worst that can happen if I do not conform to this religion, or any religion for that matter, So it was never really an issue of Christianity per se, but the whole religious, or how religion are perceived, how religion sort of box us, into this it models us into this sort of picture or image, that's the standard of living, sort of. So I find it difficult to be boxed. I find the binaries quite difficult. So it's an issue of me struggling to conform to something where I'm not allowed to stretch myself. So that's where the difficulty started, uh, with me. And I also sort of, not necessarily sort of, but I met people who were like-minded. And that's when I realized, oh, but there are actually a lot of people who go through the same thing. So I shouldn't feel bad for abandoning my religious beliefs, So as from there onwards, I've never been in any, I've never conformed to any religion. Rather, it's always just been me, Um, one of my friends likes to say that she is in charge of whatever, and she won't have to blame anyone or anything for that matter. And I think that makes logically sense, that as a person, you are in charge of whatever is happening, and you have then a choice to make the best of it, So that I started questioning that, especially when I got sick. I started asking, but where is this person that, or where is this God that we pray to? Why can't he intervene? Why must I struggle first? Why should it be difficult first? Can't he just intervene normally, naturally, out of his own instincts? So I started questioning that a lot. But yeah, from my side, it's mostly an issue of being boxed and being in the binaries. I struggle a lot with that. I struggle with hierarchies. I struggle with rules as well. So that's how I came to, or I took the decision to say, but let me just abandon religion and and walk this life thing, my way. Because I don't think there is any other way for me to walk this life thing. I wouldn't have been in a position mentally where I am right now in terms of how I perceive things, right? Because I always try to think outside the binaries, the norms, what people are used to. So I always try to imagine a situation where we do not have to be limited, where we don't have to be boxed, where we don't have to where we don't have to be a binary, when we don't have to conform. So I always think around that, because I won't necessarily say it's liberating, but you feel liberated once you start taking charge of whatever is happening in your life and around you, because you are now not performing, because religion is all about performance, right? Um, you are performing into this model citizen that will make the gates of heaven and all of that. It's tiring, really, because we have to be in the moment, and you can't be going through all of these hardships just so that you can have a better life, afterlife. That's a flawed logic for me. You can make the best of what you have right now. So for me, it's really just an issue of finding it difficult to be boxed and binary and be narrowed. Yeah.
Yo, brother, now I want to ask, like, when times are really tough, like really tough, and you seem not to have power over everything, like, okay, let me not say seem, but when you find it very difficult to feel when you find it very difficult to feel like you have power over things, where do you run to? Who do you run to? Like, where do you go? What do you do?
I know. I just lock my door, close the curtains, and I sleep and hope I will feel better the next day, because after all, I'm in charge.
I
Yeah, man.
love that. I love that so much, man. All right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this one other question. Do you believe in the matrix?
No, I don't even know what it is, but yeah.
All right, all right. I think, I, or should I explain to you what it is?
You may, you may.
The matrix is the world. It's similar. Like, people that are governed, or people that
Mm,
believe in the matrix, they have the same thinking process that you are. I mean, that you
okay.
have, right? They like, they believe that there are no limits, there are no beliefs, and if there are limits, they really depend on self. So they believe that there's a world that we live out. There's a world that we're not living in, and which we were meant to live in, like by default. So
Mm,
it's a world that, without any compliance to the norms of
okay.
communities,
Okay.
you would live
Yes.
in by default. You know, and
Okay.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So, but the thing about them is that they, like, the thing about people living in the matrix, they believe that there's power, although the power is unknown, but the power doesn't have limits, actually. It's
Okay.
like, it's a fascinating thing, man. If you just go and
Yes.
have a look at the details of the matrix, it's like, it's one interesting
Okay.
topic that you can search around. Like, it's, man,
Okay.
it's mind liberating. It's mind liberating. I'm
Mm,
I'm I'm actually trying to cling to that, because it goes into many things: finances, it
yes.
goes into beliefs, like mindset,
Yes.
so many things, brother. Relationships.
Yes.
So yeah, it's such a good thing.
don't forget to follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Asvaye on Facebook. Follow Asvaye and share the conversations. Question people about mentality.